swear
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Amoy, for appearing before the Commission today. We're grateful to you for coming. So the Commission requested your appearance before it to give evidence concerning what we called the the radio show, which was relied upon to say everyone wants a one-party state. And according to Dr. Ferrari, because of that radio show, Albert Rene said, President Rene, we do not need to have a referendum because the people have made quite clear that they want a one-party state. And we understand, I'm not sure how that radio show went, but you were somehow involved in it. So we would be grateful if you could give us some evidence about that radio show and what it was about and its purpose, and anything you can tell us would be useful. Thank you.
After the coup d'etat, I don't remember how long afterwards, my friend Yvon Savy, who was a surveyor, came to see me. So the idea originated from my friend Yvon Savy. He said, Guy, we are in a mess. We're going to have a one-party state, and we don't want that one-party state to be extreme like in other countries. Let us try and moderate it, make it less uncivilized, less dangerous. We had, I think, 2 preparatory meetings to discuss the radio show. We never, I can't speak for Yvon, I never spoke to Albert René or any minister or anyone involved in the coup d'etat or anybody. It was just Yvon and I, in secret. So Yvon then arranged for the date at Les Palmes. And as I said, I don't remember how long after the coup d'etat. And Yvon arranged for Radio Seychelles. And I think we held 3 meetings in all. I never listened to the broadcast, just like I've come here before. I haven't seen myself on the show. I just give evidence and then carry on with my work. So I took part in the radio program and get on with my work because I was the only physician in charge. I had no young doctors to assist me, so I didn't have time to listen to the radio. I was so busy. So that's it. But I'm surprised that Dr. Ferrari came to that conclusion. I can't speak for him or Albert René. I can only speak from what I know. It wasn't the intention to drum up support for the one-party state. That was never the intention, okay? Whether it turned out to be interpreted or used or whatever to justify the one-party state and gain support, that has nothing to do with my intention.
So at the time when Yvon Savy came to you, it was pretty clear that there was going to be a one-party state.
Well, who does a coup d'etat?
That's what I want to, exactly.
And then hold elections? It was obvious. Albert René was a nasty dictator. Even before he did the coup d'etat, one English governor, I was friendly with him, said, this fellow is really nasty, but we hope he doesn't destroy the country. So we knew he was nasty. We knew he would, once he did the coup d'etat, it was obvious to everyone it was going to be a one-party state. So let's work to make it less ruthless.
And so what were you sort of discussing? Were you discussing like human rights or in the radio show?
Okay. Before I answer this question, my fear is that, remember, the government controlled the radio. So maybe they doctored it, they edited it, cut out anything that was not in their favor and broadcasted what was in their favor. I can't answer that unless I listen to the radio, if you can't find it. I've tried to find it. I've been to the archives. 6 years ago, I tried to trace it. I couldn't find it.
We haven't had any luck in finding it either. We're trying to find it.
If only, I really wish I could have it. But I can tell you from my honest recollection, we, having grown up in London as a democratic socialist, I was a socialist, we grew up with certain principles. And one, you all know that. Even if I repeat it, sounds so stupid, so simple. We said independent judiciary. We grew up everywhere in Europe with independent judiciary, except now Poland and Hungary is trying to go backward towards communist judiciary, yeah? And the EU should kick them out. But we recommended independent judiciary. We recommended independent, fair civil service, not promoting members of the party, not victimizing people who disagree with the party, and so on. And there's another important thing which I meant to tell you. Judiciary, civil service, and it will come to mind later on. Oh, yes, yes. We said in communist countries, in every district, you have one candidate for the election, and you just say yes or no. Or if you are brave enough, you vote no, or you abstain. But people were scared the papers had been marked with indelible ink. People were scared. They didn't trust the. So Yvon and I said, one party, but we must have 3 candidates. Like for Glassy or Beauvalon, 3 candidates, not one like the classical one-party state. We did make that point. Whether this was broadcasted or not, I cannot say. So these are the 3 main points we fought for.
What was this program like? Was it like a discussion, a debate with people, with members of the public?
It was at Les Palmes, in a big room. There was SBC, and Yvon and I were sitting in front. It was well advertised, and I think about 30, 40 people turned up. They were not invited by invitation. It was just open.
Announced, yeah. And Yvon Savy at the time, what was his position? I mean, and his interest in this?
He was a surveyor, wealthy. I don't know his politics. To this day, I don't know whether he was with Mancam or the. Mancam was my friend. I grew up with Mancam in London. We went to nightclubs together. Sorry, Father, to striptease club. We walked up and down Rue Saint-Denis in Paris. Rue Saint-Denis is still naughty now, but Mancam and I would walk and tease all the prostitutes. So we did naughty things. But Malcolm and I were opposite. He was a capitalist, right-wing. He wanted to remain with England. And I was a socialist. I wanted changes. And I started a magazine to ask for reform in Seychelles. As I said, in those days, the governor would select a few people and run the country. And I wanted people to vote for their representative. And I wanted, we would give, the land was controlled by a few people. We said, give them 2 years to plant, to employ people to plant. And if after 2 years they don't do it, we will buy compulsory purchase from them. So I was an activist. So Malcolm and I were completely different. But we were friends. When he became president, prime minister, he never spoke to me, never invited me, except on one occasion. I arranged for the cardiologist from Cape Town, now what's his name, to operate on all my heart patients free of charge. And he came and stayed with me in my house. And that's the only time that Malcolm invited me to State House, because he had to invite the cardiologist, and therefore he invited me along. The cardiologist was the brother, he was Christian, Marius Barnard. His brother is Christian Barnard, who did the first heart transplant. But his brother, Marius, and his wife, Inez, I worked in cardiology as well. We got to know each other, okay? But that's the only time Malcolm invited me anywhere. So socially, once he became big-headed president, whatever, he didn't know me. Until I came back 6 years ago, then I got a call. Jim here. We call him Jim. So he invited me for dinner at his place. So we came back as friends when he was no longer powerful or in authority. This is something about politicians. When they are president or very powerful, they forget their friends. And then when they are nobody, then you get a call from them. But Albert René was a hot-headed fellow.
On this radio show, we were given the impression that it was manipulated for people who were in favor of a one-party state to have a chance to speak, and others were not. And it was presented as if it was a very big participation of the population, and a big proportion of them were in favor of a one-party state. Is that anywhere near what happened?
We never selected who would attend. It was a public meeting. We did not try to, we wanted both sides, everyone to participate.
And was
Your letter says we've been accused of selecting who will speak.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, that frightens me. No, not frightens, concerns me, because we never did that. We never did that. I did not say, first of all, I don't know who support Albert René and Jim Malcolm. I knew the top supporters, but the little people, the ordinary people who attended, I didn't know whether this one was Albert René, this one was Malcolm. But what I can tell you, I never say, you are for Albert René, you talk. I can categorically deny that. However, when I read your invitation to come here, I say maybe when they broadcasted the radio, they cut out whatever they didn't like and put what they liked, and then said, there they are, they're all in favor. You never know with these people.
Yeah, we're calling.
That's why I would love to listen to that.
And at the meetings, were there people saying, I'm totally against this one-party state, we need to have democratic elections, or were people at the point of, it's going to be a one-party state, so let's just try
No
and...
one ever stood up and said, we don't agree with one-party state, we want democracy, we want multi-party, we want new elections.
No one.
First of all, people were frightened, very frightened. And it wouldn't have changed it because Albania had decided it was going to be a one-party state. So it never crossed our mind to demand multi-party democracy.
Did they say they were in favor, or were they just trying to mitigate the inevitable?
I'm not sure. My recollection, I'm not sure. Maybe there were some people who spoke out in favor of Albania. I can't remember that. But most people were looking. A few of the people present were trying to mitigate the one-party state, make it a bit more civilized. But whether this came out on the broadcasted version, I have no idea. That's why I would love to hear that broadcast.
From your own interaction with the population through your practice, did you get the impression that people were in favor of the one-party system?
I think, first of all, the coup d'etat came as a shock for everybody. Whether you were a supporter of Albania or a supporter of Jez Mankam, it came as a shock to everybody. If you go by the elections before the coup d'etat, people were very simple in those days. They were not clever like nowadays. Nowadays, it's not so easy to fool people. So in those days, people were simple. And obviously, Mankam's party won. Difficult to know what percentage supported the coup d'etat, but if I were to guess, I would say the majority were not in favor of the coup d'etat. I can't prove that, but that's the impression I got.
And would you say that the actions that followed after the repressive actions would have supported your theory that the majority did not support it, so they had to be kept down?
Sorry, repeat that question.
I say, would the actions that followed the coup d'etat have supported your theory that as the majority did not support it, they had to be kept down through fear, through force?
I'm not in a position to answer that question, but opinions change. The poor people at the time, they were poor. They worked hard. There were no diggers. They would dig with their hands from morning to 4 o'clock in the sun. And they would have 100 rupees. Okay, fish was cheap, everything was cheap. But my God, the Socialists worked hard in those days. Now, it's a totally different thing. So the poor people did not have good housing. They did not have running water. They did not have lights. They did not have septic tank toilets. And as a socialist, I had fought for land reform and housing. Okay? Before the coup d'etat, I had told James Montgomery Alberini, the top priority is housing. If you want the proof of that, get the BBC. They interviewed me on the day of independence, and I did mention housing. They asked me, as a doctor, what's the biggest problem? I said, as a doctor, the biggest problem, not medicine, is housing. Okay? So I told Jim Montgomery, we can't afford to build big houses, brick walls. Let us do the basement, the pavement, the bottom of the house with running water, toilets, and galvanized iron sheets on the side. I grew up in a house made of iron sheets. We all did. There were no rich people in those days. Even the richest were poor, believe me, by today's standard. So I then said, Jim Montgomery, the three of us were in London together. Then we give it to the poor people. And when they can afford it, they will remove this galvanized iron and put bricks. Then maybe 3 years later, they could do this wall. But the infrastructure, the running water, the electricity, the toilet would be there. So to this day, I think one of the achievements, I shouldn't say that I'll be murdered on Facebook, but we are doing fairly well on housing. That's another thing. Nowadays, I try not to be too much one side or that side. When the government does something good, I say it. You see, I'm still independent.
But, I mean, to get that housing, was the one-party state a necessary step to have the focus on the housing, do you think? Because some people...
Okay.
Yeah.
Montcalm would not have done land reform, would not have done housing or health. He would have done it, but very slowly. Alberini did it quicker, okay? At a cost, Montcalm Montcalm started the housing. Don't forget that. He imported those wooden houses. Do you remember? Woodstock? Yeah? He didn't have money. Even if he wanted to build houses, he did not have money. There was no tourism. But Montcalm, as I said, I was talking with him about housing. He brought wooden houses, prefabricated, from Malaysia with Sunny Khan, who owns that big shop there, yeah? So Montcalm did the housing, but it would have been slower than Alberini did. For example, reclamation of the land, perseverance. That is a big achievement. Montcalm would perhaps have reclaimed the land. I don't think he would have put the cheap houses in there. He would probably have put middle or upper class houses, because his politics was on the right.
I mean, if he didn't have money, Montcalm didn't have money, where did Albert Rene get the money from?
I don't know, but he got some from Gaddafi, some from North Korea, cement from North Korea, because houses are made of cement. And he got a lot of, some of the stuff I don't know where he got the money, to be honest. It was never publicized. Do we know how he got the money?
Isn't it from loans? That's why we go into such heavy debts?
For the reclamation, he took big loans. And looking back, he was damn lucky. because he borrowed a lot of money to do the reclamation. That's why I'm independent. I can say things the way I think. So he borrowed a lot of money, bankrupted the country. But at the time, the dollar was cheap,
Yeah.
and the reclamation cost very little. Yeah? In money, in today's money
Today's
term.
money, yes.
But he bankrupted the country. But that's where luck played the part. Once he bankrupted the country, the IMF came and forgave us 45%. Yeah? So although Alberoni borrowed like hell and bankrupted the country, in the end, he got away with it because IMF arranged for us to be forgiven 45%. Do you get the point?
I had a conversation with somebody who told me that Mr. Rene had told him, it doesn't matter if we can't pay back the loan because nobody has ever foreclosed on a country. So,
To a certain extent, that's very true. If you borrow a lot from someone and you can't pay, it's not your problem, it's not Seychelles' problem. The problem is with the people who lent you the money. So he got away with it by looking back, by luck. Now, those reclamations, try and do it now. You won't be able to afford it. And this is where he put a lot of low-cost houses on them at Perseverance. I go back to housing. I mean, Perseverance would be for the quite rich people if you were in another country. If you go to Mauritius, the houses, the quality of the houses in Mauritius are third class compared to us. You go out in the countryside in Mauritius, the houses are half finished, not painted. Yeah? But look at Perseverance. Look at all those houses coming up.
waterfront properties.
So we've achieved a lot. But what the Madam Chair asked me, was it the only way? No. No. I keep saying we could have achieved all or most of what we've achieved without the dictatorship. Mauritius, they haven't had a dictatorship, and they have a good educational system, a good health system. Yeah? You don't have to have a dictatorship. I think even without a dictatorship, we would have made a lot of progress. So the answer is there's very rarely is there a justification for a coup d'etat and dictatorship. Look at Cuba. Okay, they needed change. Castro took it over, and he became a dictator. To this day, they don't want to let go. Dictators don't do a coup d'etat and then call elections. That's another proof. Otherwise, Castro would have held elections. The ones who say Albert René would have held elections, they are mad. He would never have held elections until the pressure came from outside, tremendous pressure, and then he had to. He didn't do it by choice. But going back to that broadcast, I am sorry people got the impression that the purpose of the meeting was to drum up support for the one-party state. I'm sorry if anyone believed that we, two grown-up, educated people, would select people to speak out in favor of the one-party state. That is certainly, I can categorically deny that. I don't know how it came about for some people to think that way. I can't control what people think.
It may be because of some of the radio shows that followed that people reflect back on that one, like the 4112, the room 4112, that sort of show where you have a lot of commentary setting the scene and then, you know, telling you what it is the people are talking about and what they're saying. It may be because they did use the media in those ways that people then reflect back on that and see that. Or maybe the editor. We don't know. We'll have to ask him.
It's possible our good intention were misused. I cannot comment on because I didn't listen to the broadcast. Like now, you are all doing an excellent work, but I only listen to it now and then, you know.
I think also at that time, Doctor, if you permit me, the concept of one-party state at that time, the context, it was just obvious to everybody to explain the principles, the doctrine itself, the ideology. It was not elaborated for everybody to understand what it's about. That's my view on the issue, because at that time it was in the international context for Africa, Asia, Indian Ocean. So you have to put in the context the liberation of the old colonies. So to explain what is one-party state, with all the principles, the Marxism, the Karl Marx and everything, not everybody could build that at that time. It's very important to put the context. So maybe some elite people or so-called educated, or the academics were able to really to understand one-party state and all the implications in the long run. That's my understanding.
Well, another example is Zimbabwe. If you think Mugabe took over the country by arms and then he would allow multi-party, never. He got ZANU to join him, okay? And once ZANU joined him, he destroyed ZANU, and he carried on with his one-party state. So anybody who tried after the coup d'etat to deny the existence of a one-party state, they were not realistic. There's a coup d'etat, there's going to be a one-party state. Let's try and modify it.
Very good example is Zimbabwe. It's Seychelles. It's almost the same line of actions. During the liberation struggle, Kenneth Kaunda brought all of them, Zambia. No. So all the two parties were fighting to get liberated when one party state came. The same applied to Zimbabwe and Zambia also.
Yeah.
So they were all the same. Yeah.
Another issue we wanted to ask you about was we have had some complainants come before us and say that they were incarcerated in a mental home or given medications, and they don't know why or who authorized it or why they were there. So we wondered whether you can tell us what the legal requirements were, if any, at the time. You know, what would happen if there was someone, I think we had Mr. Pillay said he went out on the street against the coup, and his father was obviously very much with Albert Rene, bought him his first car, and no doubt that made Mr. Michael Pillay vulnerable in the circumstances. So if you could just explain to us a little bit how it was.
In the...
Sorry, he actually said that when he was taken to the hospital, he was given an injection by you.
Two injections in the knees.
In the knees. Yes, that's right. And then he wasn't able to walk.
And then he said Dr. Brown treated him with lithium.
Yes.
Okay, let me set the scene. I came here, I was a physician, not a psychiatrist. And then I discovered there was a mental hospital. There was no nurse, no doctor, no diagnosis, no treatment. Everyone was on Largactil, everyone was locked up. So I had done, every medical student is allowed a choice during 3 months of your career, student career, you're allowed to choose 3 months what you do. And I chose psychiatry. So I had a little bit of interest in it, but my experience was limited to 3 months in London. So when I heard of this dreadful state, I went there, and it would take me too long to describe it, but they were being treated like animals. And
were the people in there, how did they get in there? The people that were in there?
I did not put them in there. The other doctors would say, oh, he needs treatment, he goes there. Now, in Australia, in England, the rules are so strict about compulsory admission for psychiatric treatment. I have practiced that in London for 35 years. You need the laws. The Mental Health Act of 1983 in England is so bloody strict that the pendulum has swung to the other side now. Recently, we had a young man in London who'd gone mad. He was a danger to himself and to his relatives. But the psychiatrists and so on would not admit him when all the relatives were saying, hey, you know, do you have to wait until he kills himself or kills someone? So the pendulum now has swung to the other extreme. So in the mid-70s, in Seychelles, I don't know if they had any written laws, but there was no such thing. You did not have to have 2 doctors. Well, in England, you need a consultant psychiatrist, a family doctor, and an approved social worker. And very often you had what is called a community psychiatric nurse as well. So over there, you don't take people's liberty and lock them up. But in Seychelles, there was no such thing as any paperwork. If a doctor or the police thought you were psychotic, they would just grab you and take you to the hospital. And there at the back, they had a dark little cell, not even painted white, and they would lock you up. And when I started here, it took me, I think, 2 years to fight to have it closed down, okay? Because everybody accepted it as normal, but I thought it was barbaric. So in those days, there was no form. There was no form for compulsory admission, no second opinion, no rights of appeal. Now in England, you have the rights of appeal and what. If the police or a doctor, whatever, thought you had to be admitted, that's it, you were admitted. Then I would come the next day, and I would assess the patient and treat the patient in the way I thought right. But we had no choice of drugs. You want to know the truth? Go to the archives. Look at the 1968. The last time we produced a medical annual report was 1968. Go to the archives. There are 2 centers, mental services. There is a mental hospital at Les Canels. People are treated with Largactil, or worse to that effect. Treated. So you can't call that treated when there was no diagnosis, no nurse, no doctor, no notes. And that was still the system when I came here. We didn't have any medicine for schizophrenia, none of those modern medicine. All this had to be changed. But there was no paperwork, no regulations, no right of appeal. Now, do you want me to talk about those individual cases? I honestly have no recollection of those two cases. But interestingly, last week or in the last 2 weeks, I met two people. One is an artist who had a nervous breakdown. Now he recovered, is a very successful artist. Another one who didn't know what he was doing is now a very successful businessman. What I'm saying, if the stress is big enough, say your girlfriend leaves you, or whatever happens, or you drink too much, or you take some drugs or whatever, you could have a temporary psychosis, mental illness. And some people will get over it quickly, others will go on for a long time. Okay? So I can't remember those two cases. I won't mention names. But when I talk to people who were their friends, who knew them, they all say, oh yeah, he wasn't well, he had periods of not being well, yeah? So it's conceivable that they were admitted. It's also conceivable that we could have injected them with Largactil, but I have no recollection. But it won't be in the knees. You never inject Largactil in the knee. And the other thing, when the gentleman says Dr. Brown treated him with lithium, look at the evidence, that's what he said. Dr. Brown treated me with lithium. Well, when I had heard the name Dr. Brown, I said, I don't recall Dr. Brown, and I was acting CMO. I was the only senior doctor. I don't remember Dr. Brown. So I phoned my nurse's colleague, and then they said, oh, Dr. Brown came in 2 years after you left. I left in November 79. So apparently Dr. Brown came in 1981. Now, if Dr. Brown thought this person was not mentally normal, had hypomania, and needed treatment with lithium. Lithium is used for hypomania. So if you say, oh, Dr. Amoy treated me with drugs or whatever, then why did Dr. Brown treat that person with medication 2 years later? Okay? So I think it's possible that those two gentlemen had a psychotic episode, a nervous breakdown of some sort, and then they were forcefully brought to the hospital. It's possible we had to keep them quiet with Largactil, which was the only drug we had. And now they are better. But I can only tell you one thing. We would, none of us, there are doctors, nurses still alive who worked with me, who worked at the time. Okay, Mrs. Paul Chow, Mrs. Pagassen, Gérard Pagassen, so Major Pagassen. There are lots of nurses still alive. Miss Catherine, Miss Fuemino, Milka, they're all here. All those senior nurses are still there. And if you interview them, they will tell you that we never victimize people. We never tranquilize them just because of political reasons or because they were supporters of Alberoni or whatever. No, this never happened. And as I said, there are so many people alive now, they will tell you that this never happened.
So not like in Russia, China, other countries where they use medications to make people conform.
That
So-
I can
yeah.
deny.
Yeah.
A doctor trained in London or France or Australia, you would have problem finding a doctor to do
it's un-
unethical things.
yeah. So, oh, sorry. If I went running down the road screaming, I'm against the coup, and the police, and maybe I'm just generally angry, but the police decide something wrong with you, they can just arrest me, take me to that hospital, and then I have to wait for you to come the next
No, you would
day.
be seen by the duty doctor,
Seen by-
casualty, A&E, and then if he thinks you are psychotic, then he would probably lock you up in that little dark cell until I came, and then I usually released them. I did not believe in locking up people in a dark cell.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, if or let's say the army brought me in, right? I'm just wondering about the power dynamics and the ability. If the army determined that I was, a psychopath and decided I needed to be locked up, would you be able to say no if I was just not complying with how they wanted me to be? Could you challenge the army, or would I have to stay there?
Well, the army could be right or wrong. The police could be right or wrong. A doctor will not decide on because of who brought you in. You will sit down with the patient. I always sat down. Before I did my ward run, I did not stand at the foot of the bed like most doctors. I insisted on a chair next to every bed. And I would sit next to the bed and talk with the patient. That's my training. Okay? I wasn't like the other doctors. Remember, I've been a teacher in London for the past 20-something years. I've been teaching doctors. So I would not make up my mind because it's the army or the police or whatever. I would sit down with the patient and take a proper history. Let the patient talk. Nowadays, when we teach consultation skill, we always say the doctor should, I talk a lot now, but when you are the patient, I shut up. I would say, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, take your time and tell me how you feel, what the problem is. And then I shut up. Because that's your time, that's your chance to tell me what you think in your own word with no interruption from me. That's how we teach now, okay? So I will let the patient tell me what they think, what's wrong with them, and so on. And then I will ask questions and so on. And then I would come to the conclusion. But I would not take into consideration who brought them in. I would not say, the army, therefore the army is correct. But I would also not say, it's the army, therefore the army is not correct. I would make up my own mind.
I guess I was trying to think, whether or not doctors could be intimidated. But if the army brought me and said, don't want to see this person on the street again, obviously crazy. And then you decided, I'm not crazy. You obviously were educated in England, right? So you were educated in a democratic, free society. What about those doctors that came here from places like Cuba and places like that? I mean...
But you would not be intimidated by the army. If it came to that situation, it never arose. No army ever put pressure on me. But if it were to happen, I would share the problem with a group of senior doctors. I'd call a meeting and say, this is what is happening. Let me give you an example. I got a call after the coup d'etat. I can't remember how long afterwards. 3 o'clock in the morning. I was acting CMO. Doctor, that's the minister talking. I'm the minister. My brother has been arrested and put in jail because the police say he was driving whilst drunk, and your doctor, Dr. So-and-so, declared him drunk. So the police has locked him up, and he's my brother. You, as acting CMO, go and release him. This is actually what happened, and I refused. I'm giving you an example. You don't need to be brave. You knew it was the right thing to do. I never said I'm going to be brave or whatever. I just said, sorry, Minister, if the doctor thought he was drunk, then the police would lock him up until he's sober up. Oh, I'm going to sack the whole lot. So I said, if you do that, you'll get big problems. So the next morning I called a meeting when I got to the hospital. It was an English doctor, a young English doctor. So I said, tell me what's happened. He said, well, he was obviously drunk. So I then, for the minister, I said, this is the story. Your brother, unfortunately, was medically drunk. And the young doctors said, if he threatens us or whatever, we will go to the president. So the minister backed down. I'm just telling you that story to show that we can stand up.
If you want to, right? So I'm just wondering whether those doctors coming from communist, socialist countries where, you know, maybe those countries, maybe the doctors believe if you're not conforming, you are mad because there's no advantage to not conforming. I'm just wondering whether they would have the same approach, because you have a liberal background, even though you're a socialist, you know, whether they would have the same approach.
I'm no longer a socialist. I'm I'm a social capitalist now. Yeah, you hear about how doctors supported the system against the individual, especially in 1 or 2 communist countries. But in the context of Seychelles, I don't think it happened. I think our doctors were all English, except Dr. Patel, Suketu Patel's father, and Dr. Day. All the other doctors were English. Maureen Kirkpatrick is here, my good friend. She worked here for 30-something years and is still alive. You can interview her. She will say we never did anything unethical because we were a group of English doctors. And last 2 weeks ago, I wrote about George Floyd, who I always speak out because I've been speaking out since I was 18 years old. So I wrote on Facebook that it was wrong to put the knee on his neck for 8 minutes until he died. But I always try to be constructive. So I said, the lessons learned, you can go and look at my Facebook, we have to learn lessons. And I said, don't use more force than is necessary. And if a policeman or whatever law soldier commit murder, it's still murder, no matter who you are, whether you are, no? And I said, we must train our police and our soldier to know when to disobey orders. Go and look at my Facebook. Those are the 3 points I made. So to this day, I try to draw lessons from horrible events and try to educate our police and soldiers. I met a young soldier. I was buying fertilizer. I'm a kindergartner, and I met him there in the shop. He's middle, and I said, the only advice I've got to tell you, know the rights of the people and know when to disobey. I said, you will never attack peaceful demonstrators. But if they start burning shops and so on, then you have to use whatever is necessary to stop it. So at every opportunity, I'm talking to soldiers and policemen.
That's good, right? I think it's... So thank you so much for coming and for clearing up from your perspective how that radio show, what it was about. I think that's important for us. We now know you weren't in cahoots, right, setting it up. And also for explaining about the procedures and everything for the medical treatment of persons. I did try to find some legislation. I couldn't find any until I think about well into the 80s. You know, and then I think even then, I think you could, if I recall correctly, you could detain someone for 72 hours prior to bringing them to court to get an order. So if you were picked up Friday night, you'd be spending your weekend probably. But we have no further questions for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Unless you
much.
have anything you'd like to add.
I would only add one thing, that the relatives, families, close friends of those who suffered either discrimination or even worse, disappearance, murder, whatever. I'm sorry it happened, and let's hope the truth will come out. I spoke to an ex-minister, someone who took part in the coup d'etat. I knew he was going to die. And I said, I knew you must have done things that you wouldn't do looking back. I know horrible things happen, and I know you know it. Please write everything you know. I told that to James Montcalm as well. Write everything you know, lock it up in a bank account to be released 3 years after you die. I don't know if that person has done that, but that's a message I'm telling people. Before the commission, that was 4 years ago. I've been telling people, write whatever, even though they regret it or not really, write it, and then we'll know. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if anyone's written anything and they want to disclose it, we would love to receive it. So thank you very much. We will adjourn now and we will return Monday at 9 a.m. That will be our third week of sittings to try and make up for some of those weeks we lost. So thank you. Bye.
All rise.